Today I'm going to be talking about a Civil War prison, specifically the Libby prison. The Libby prison was a prison located in Richmond, Virginia, and it was a Confederate prison. And surprisingly, it was actually located fairly close to the Capitol. I have built a model of it in Minecraft. Alright, so as you can see here is Libby prison. Libby prison was located in Richmond, Virginia, and it was right close to the James River, which would have been right around here, I guess, ish, in this green area. And before it was turned into a prison, this building used to be a tobacco factory, a shipping supplier, and also a grocery store. So, give you a quick tour of the outside of the prison. So here, as you can see, are the guards. There were always at least 30 guards on duty outside of the prison. And you can see the top floor is entirely for prisoner, and same for the second to the top floor. And on the ground level floors, or there are actually 2 levels, depending on which ground you're talking about. There's this floor, which is the hospital, and then there's another room for the prisoners, and then the commandant's office. And then below that, there are 2 guard rooms, one right here, and one over here, and this sealed off back here is the east cellar. The east cellar was also known as rat hell because it had a rat infestation that was so severe that when they turned it into a prison, they decided just to seal off the cellar instead of using it to house prisoners or guards or anything like that. So, let's see. Prisoners. The prisoners in Confederate prisons were not very well off because the Confederacy was actually experiencing food shortages. So the prisoners did not get much food. And as you can see here, the windows were mainly just bars and instead of glass. So therefore the prisoners were exposed to elements, and many prisoners died of exposure. And due to the crowded conditions, since there were over 1,200 people crammed into this building, diseases such as smallpox, typhoid, pneumonia, and dysentery were common. And according to the surgeons in the hospital, who worked in the hospital, about 10% of the prisoners were seriously ill at any point in time. And a prisoner's diet consisted of about, let's see if we can just demonstrate it really quick, but just like probably, let's see, so that's about 1 pound of bread and half a pound of meat, probably just a pork chop. So yeah, so what the prisoners had to eat. So their rations were per day just about 1 pound of bread and half a pound of meat. Now this may not sound too bad, but the thing is, the average American eats about 5.5 pounds of food per day. So once you take that into account, so the prisoners were kind of hungry. And after quite a bit of begging, they managed to get a furnace, a stove, so that way they can actually cook their meat instead of having to eat it raw. Plus, it would provide some warmth and lighting. So, but eventually, in 1863, due to food shortages, the prisoners' rations were reduced to about only 8 ounces of bread and only about 2 ounces of meat, plus a small cup of beans or rice to supplement that. Now, as you know, the prisoners by then were pretty much just starving by then, and many of them had scurvy or vitamin C deficiency. So, yeah, so the prisoner's life was hard, and as you can tell, eventually they got sick of it. So, there were 2 escape events, well, 2 attempted escapes, or at least 2 notable attempted escapes. So the first escape event wasn't actually by the prisoners, it was actually by the Union Army, who tried to rescue the prisoners. So what they did is they marched over, and they were basically going to demand all the prisoners free. But the thing is, the commandant had heard of the plan, had gotten word of it, and actually dug a mine underneath the prison, filled it with over 200 pounds of gunpowder, and threatened to blow up the entire prison, and if the Union troops didn't retreat. So obviously, you know, the Union troops retreated because they didn't want their own prisoners to be blown up into smithereens. So, yeah, and the second escape attempt, this one was actually successful. It was perpetrated by the prisoners, actually. So, do you remember that stove we had back there? Well, behind the wood pile that was used to fire the stove, one of the prisoners actually had a knife with him, and had managed to scrape off some of the mortar from the bricks. And eventually, he had cleared a hole through the wall into the east cellar, also known as Rat Hell. And actually, to cover the sounds of the prisoners upstairs would actually stomp their feet on the ground, so that way the guards wouldn't hear the chipping away and tunneling. So, as you know, this is known as Rat Hell, and it's rat infested. So one of the prisoners actually described it working in here as he could feel the rats crawling all over him as he was tunneling. So as you can imagine, the prisoners tunneling would be quite uncomfortable. So there are 3 attempts to tunnel out. The first attempt was to go to a sewer pipe, and hopefully it would be drained enough that they could just walk out through the sewer. But it turned out the sewer was flooded, and as soon as they broke through the wall of the sewer, it flooded their tunnel, and they had to stop digging there. So the second attempt, they tried to dig through, but they ended up hitting a series of logs that had been driven into the ground as part of the foundation. So that tunnel was given up on. Finally, the third tunnel, they managed to dig all the way through, up to a tobacco shed. Now, an interesting, kind of funny thing is, actually, at one point, they thought they had reached it, so they started digging up, and it was midnight at the time, so the guards couldn't really see them. They looked up, and it turned out that they were actually short of the tobacco shed. Now, luckily, none of the guards noticed, because, luckily for them at least, none of the guards noticed, because all the guards were busy looking at the prison windows because they thought the prison was unescapable. So they just quietly buried the hole back, like I just did, and then just kept digging until they reached the tobacco shed. And from there, about 109 prisoners managed to escape from Libby prison and gather in Office James Rivers Towing Company's warehouse, where they met here, and then they just walked out into the street and just walked straight out of Richmond, and 49 of them managed to make it back to the Union. And it's actually speculated that over half of the 1,200 prisoners could have escaped if the escape was planned more carefully and executed with more caution. Because what happened was, as soon as the other prisoners got wind of the escape tunnel, they all rushed down in a stampede to try to get to the escape tunnel. But all the ruckus alerted guards, who sent the prisoners back up to the upper floors, preventing them from escaping through the tunnel after the 109 who had already escaped. And so that's about that. So I'll just show you basic geography. So here's Northside Carey Street. Well, up there is Northside Carey Street. So right here, as you can see, this is Northside Carey Street. It goes right directly by the entrance of the prison, and it's about 10 feet above Southside Canal Street, which is this street right here, where my cursor thing is. So right now I'm running along Southside Canal Street, and the James River would have been to my right. And actually, Libby prison was relatively close to the James River, and that was good for the Confederacy, because they could receive prisoners by ship. And it was also one of the only buildings in the area to have running water. And so yeah, and I'll just give you a basic overview of the buildings. So there's, as you know, is Libby prison. And here's Office James River Towing Company. Here's the tobacco shed that the prisoners dug out of. And here is Kerr's warehouse, which was an actual building. Didn't really hold any significant historical significance, but you know, it was there, so I just built it. So that's about it, and I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. And so yeah, so hope I see you guys later and watch one of my other videos.